the richest, most powerful nation in the world is electing a new leader.
It is so great to see this unbelievable crowd. Thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all.
It looks like becoming America's first billion-dollar election. For a year and more, the campaign planes have crisscrossed the continent.
To protect Social Security.
Political ads have choked the airwaves.
George W. Bush, a compassionate conservative leader.
To really take on the big drug companies.
We should pass money back to the taxpayers. That's what I've done in Texas.
With just 23 days to go, Bush and Gore.
Who is the real Al Gore? Was he the...
Pollsters have polled and pundits have pontificated.
Each of the two men, Gore as the fibber and Bush as the dim bulb.
Governor Bush smiled when he talked about executing the two.
There's a danger sign for Democrats here.
After 8 years of Clinton-Gore, Americans are more prosperous than ever in their history. Yet for months it seemed they'd opt for the man who promised change and an end to bitter partisan warfare.
I don't have enemies to fight. I have no stake in the bitter arguments of the last few years. I want to change the tone of Washington to one of civility and respect.
But then Al Gore surged into the lead by promising to do battle on behalf of those who feel left behind.
And that's the difference in this election. They're for the powerful. We're for the people. So if I say to you tonight, if you entrust me with the presidency, I will fight for you.
But now Gore's lead has evaporated too. It's become the closest presidential race since Kennedy beat Nixon 40 years ago.
The Democratic presidential nominee has gotten a tour of the debate hall.
A vast press corps is absorbed by the contest. But if you polled all 280 million Americans today, it's a safe bet most would endorse one view at least.
I'm sick of it. I'm ready for it to end. November can't come soon enough.
If you want to join the dogged band of journalists who follow Governor Bush's campaign around the nation, you have to sign up days before you know where you'll be going.
Good morning.
How's your weekend?
It was great. Too short.
And then report to Austin International Airport at 6:30 on a Monday morning. The regular traveling press corps has had its bags hauled on and off this plane 100 times. A life of 15-hour days, 7-day weeks, month after month.
Morning, everybody. With a cold staff here.
At least they, unlike the candidate, don't need to be sharply suited, looking fresh and ready for the fray. Across the country at Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, D.C., the Vice President is boarding Air Force Two. There was a time, weeks and months ago, when the candidates would talk on the record to the airborne press corps.
I think that from time to time, people bemoan the length of our campaigns, and you could make an argument if there was a way to condense it and put it into a much shorter period of time, there'd be a lot you could say for that. Under our Constitution, with freedom of expression, I really don't know how you could do that. So I'm enjoying it myself.
But that was then, and this is now. On board the Bush campaign plane, leaving Austin, Texas, and heading west. The election is neck and neck, there's just weeks to go, and the slightest slip could cause disaster. The motto of both campaigns is keep control. When we got on the plane this morning, we found these glossy brochures about education on our seats. As far as the Bush campaign's concerned, education is going to be the issue for the next 2 days. But But to make sure it is, they've got to control the agenda, and they do. This little red book is a minute-by-minute account of everything that the press corps are going to be doing today and tomorrow. We're flying all the way from Austin, Texas to Portland, Oregon on the northwest coast, even further north to Spokane, Washington, south to Silicon Valley in Northern California, and down to Los Angeles. And during all of that trip, there'll only be 3 events that are open to the cameras, 2 of them in schools. So it'll be really testing the journalist's ingenuity to write about anything other than education in the next 2 days. Frustrating for the press, I reflected as we crossed the Rocky Mountains, but hardly surprising. George Bush was just recovering from the worst 2 weeks of his campaign, a fortnight of slip-ups and trivia. There was the time Bush called a New York Times reporter a bad word in front of an open microphone.
There's Adam Clymer, major league asshole from New York.
Big time.
I said I'm sorry that remark made it into the public arena. People who know me, I've been the leader of the governor of Texas. I've been elected.
Gore opposed bipartisan reform. He's pushing a big...
And there was the Republican TV ad that seemed to accuse the Democrats, in a subliminal flash frame, of being rats.
It's coming out of the rotation, Dave. I mean, it's not going to be around.
Make that in Bush speak subliminal.
I want to make it clear to people that, you know, the idea of putting subliminal messages into ads is ridiculous.
The governor of Texas, George W.
So Bush stopped talking to the yapping jackals of the political press and chatted instead to pleasant people like Oprah Winfrey. And daytime chat show host Regis Philbin.
What do you think?
I love it. It looks good. It does. Yes, the Regis collection right there.
Oh, you old devil. He gave Oprah a kiss, but he wore my shirt and tie. That's cool.
The folksy George W. image soon eclipsed the bumbling Bush in the public mind. His polls are heading up, and he means to keep them that way. So now, as we sweep past downtown Portland, along freeways cleared of all traffic for the governor's motorcade, we're trailing in the wake of a man who's on message.
I thought I would do is I want to, as Laura mentioned, we're talk about a subject dear to our hearts, and that's the education of every single child.
And a curious message it was, to me at least. Education in America is a state and local matter, as Bush stresses all the time.
See, if you believe in local control of schools like I do...
As governor of Texas, he takes sole credit for its education policy.
With reforms in Texas, reading scores have gone up.
Yet both he and Gore claim that somehow as president, they could rescue America's failing public schools.
America today is in the midst of an education recession that can threaten our very future.
It's a contradiction, I found, that concerns none of his ardent admirers.
Oh, I thought he did fine. He really emphasized his focus on education.
Do you think the President of the United States really has that much to do with education, though?
Absolutely. Yeah, he sets the tone for the nation.
As for the traveling press, we were bussed off to a hotel banqueting hall turned filing center to relay to a breathless world the tidings of the governor's education policy. But I discovered when they got their lines untangled,
Let me just sit down and wait for a minute.
their laptops plugged in and their mic switched on,
Okay, your piece is all taped.
that the last thing they wanted to write or talk about was education.
Which should be interesting. I mean, he's getting nastier and nastier, and it's getting more pointed. Exactly. It at least gives us something to write about.
Sounds good. He also made a crack at Gore over tax cuts.
What have you found to write about today?
Today was a day where, I mean, all of the details of his education plan that he talked about, he's talked about before. So the plan itself was not news. What was interesting was the escalation of rhetoric, with his talking about an education recession and energy prices are rising and farm economy is stagnating. He's trying to cast some doubt about the future.
Things are not that great after all.
Things are not that great and could go south soon.
Not much of a story, perhaps, but at least it's about the tactics of the horse race, not boring old policy issues. And anyway, we're off again.
I like that.
Next stop, Spokane, Washington. on the fringes of the Northern Rockies. The governor is holding an airport rally. There are just minutes to unload and set up.
Tripod tube. Huh? Big black tripod tube. Big black tripod.
There's a daily ritual about rallies like these. The invited audience of faithful fans, pre-armed with posters and streamers, and the off-the-cuff spontaneous address that's been delivered almost word for word 100 times before. The so-called stump speech.
There's a difference of opinion in this campaign, and here it is. Here it is. He would rather spend your money for you. I would rather you have some of your money so you can spend it for yourself.
You have got to have somebody who is willing to wield the power of the presidency in your interest on your behalf, and that's what I want to do.
On the other side of the country, in the key battleground state of Ohio, before thousands of fervent trade union activists, we caught up with Al Gore delivering his stump speech.
Because this election is not about George W. Bush, and it's not about me. This election is about you.
It's called Activating the Base. Most of these people can barely imagine how their city, their state, could bring itself to vote for anyone but their man.
If it doesn't, we're going to burn the town down.
Read my lips. Stay out of the bushes.
Both candidates need people like these to man the phone banks, knock on doors, ferry voters to the booths on the big day.
Oh, I just want Gore and Clinton replaced, and he's the man to do it.
We gotta have Bush in there to save the farmers and to save the food.
But the real reason they're in Washington State, or Ohio, or now in Grand Rapids, Michigan, is because these are the swing states, where a few tens of thousands of uncommitted voters will decide the election, as both campaigns agree.
In American politics, all politics is local, meaning that you have to come and talk to the local community, the newspapers, the television stations, the radio stations that reach people in their home and where they work.
The local newspaper, the local television stations all give that visit tremendous publicity. And statistics show that most Americans actually get their news from local media.
The daily rally may be the most spectacular part of the day, but this is the most important. For an hour and a half, Al Gore's been in this hotel giving back-to-back interviews with TV stations from right across the state.
Where's your camera guy?
Right here.
Oh.
That way he can tailor his message very precisely to independent voters in each community, and incidentally, give the individual anchors their moment of fame.
Well, that was good, good interview.
I thought so. How did it go, Keith?
Oh, great. They gave us 12 minutes.
12 minutes.
Yeah, we expected 5. We got 12. We asked some great questions. Just very interesting to meet them, 4 feet apart. And you sit there and you're looking into the vice president's eyes and saying, wow, this could be the president. And it's just, it's a unique experience.
Is it the biggest moment of your career so far, do you think?
Yeah, probably. I think so, yeah.
Live from West Michigan's news leader.
Michigan is the quintessential swing state.
Thousands fill Calder Plaza as Vice President Al Gore brings his campaign to Grand Rapids.
And Connie Mulder is the quintessential uncommitted voter.
Gore gave high fives to the kids.
Watching the news that night in her home in Grand Rapids, Michigan,
I'll balance the budget every single year.
she's mildly impressed that Al Gore has held a rally in her city.
I think that it will probably make some difference for to change people's minds on whether they're going to vote for him or not. I mean, he cares enough about what Michigan does to show up here, and that's important.
This was a big day for Al Gore, particularly in West Michigan. When I talked to him...
But the brief one-on-one interview her own local station aired so proudly did little to satisfy Connie's need for information on the issues.
I want to put Medicare and Social Security in a lockbox and protect them, and I want to cut taxes for middle-class families.
I think that I need more information on the Medicare issues, the tax issues, the big issues, the education issue. When they throw around the numbers, and then one says that yours are off and yours are off, I don't know.
A week before, the candidates had convened at the University of Massachusetts in the Democratic stronghold of Boston.
No more bullshit! No more bullshit!
In theory, the televised debates were supposed to have solved Connie Mulder's problem.
And now the first question, as determined by a flip of a coin, it goes to Vice President Gore.
I think a lot of Americans who have not made up their mind yet in the campaign are waiting to watch the debates. They get a chance to watch for 90 minutes and evaluate the candidates for themselves, not see them through the filter of the nightly news or the morning newspaper.
He would spend more money on tax cuts for the wealthiest 1% than all of the new spending that he proposes for education, health care, prescription drugs, and national defense all combined.
But debates in which the candidates are forbidden to speak to each other directly are not much of a forum for pinning down your opponent.
This is a man, he's got great numbers. He talks about numbers. I'm beginning to think not only did he invent the internet, but he invented the calculator. It's fuzzy math.
And anyway, the filterers and spinners were there en masse. Crowded onto a floored-over ice hockey rink next door to the debating chamber were 2,000 journalists.
Describe Medicare as a government HMO. It's not.
And as soon as the debate concluded, an army of spin merchants crowded in, intent on claiming their man the winner.
I thought it was a great debate for Al Gore. I think the Vice President laid out his issues.
Governor Bush's plan, which trusts people to make decisions for their own lives, their own health care.
I think Al Gore won the debate. He won the debate on choice as well.
The instant polls agreed that Al Gore had won. But within 2 days, the Bush campaign would win the battle of the spin.
Al Gore did not tell the truth.
They focused media attention on a couple of trivial Gore inaccuracies, including this one.
Okay, I'm all set.
First, I want to compliment the governor on his response to those fires and floods in Texas. I accompanied James Lee Witt down to Texas when those fires broke out.
But it turned out that Al Gore never visited Texas fire sites with the head of the Federal Emergency Agency.
CBS's Bill Whitaker and John Roberts traveled with the candidates again today.
And on the road next day, the media were in full cry against Al Gore, the serial exaggerator.
But he would probably like to take back that mistaken reference to a trip that he made to Texas with the head of FEMA back in 1998. Gore needs the Texas governor to be defending his tax cut, not making fun of another fabricated story by the vice president. Dan?
Back in Grand Rapids, Michigan, none of it, neither the debate itself nor the spin, had made much impression on Connie Mulder.
I watched as much as I could stay awake for. I think I drifted in and out for a while in the last hour, but it was a lot of generalities, and I really would like to see more specifics on all of their plans before I make up my mind.
How do you know that, Karen? How do you know they're getting nervous?
The truth is that for all the length of the campaigns and the massive media coverage, it's very difficult for candidates to get details of their own policies before the average voter.
Let me describe the budget as I see it. First, you've heard about the budget surplus. It's $4.6 trillion. That means there's money left over. After budgets have been increased.
Harder still to criticize their opponents.
Their proposal works with state programs that are strictly income related. There are about 15 of them, and a third of them presently run their programs through their welfare offices because it's income related.
Got it, great. Thank you.
The traveling media, obsessed with the horse race, don't consider it their job.
It is difficult in this pace. The guy gives a speech, you get on a bus, then you get on a plane, then you get off the plane, you get on a bus, you go to another speech, you get on a bus, you get on a plane. At that pace, it is very difficult to have the depth and the context that we should have in our everyday work, which is why you need reinforcements.
Those reinforcements are there, on the inside pages of the Wall Street Journal or buried in 1,000 political websites. But few voters bother to search them out. They know that when the new president arrives in Washington, the details of his policies are unlikely to survive the inevitable battles with Congress and with 50 independent state governments. The real purpose of this extraordinary marathon is to let 150 million American voters judge the character, the competence, and the overall priorities of two men who they hardly knew before it started.
Please welcome Vice President Al Gore, everybody.
Despite its frequent absurdities and its hideous expense, the campaign serves that purpose well enough.
I was in the House of Representatives for 8 years and the Senate for 8 years before.
Everybody knows that Al Gore is experienced and knowledgeable and boring.
Across party lines, working with Republicans.
Everybody knows that George Bush is dumber and makes better jokes.
Number 7. Make sure the White House library has lots of books with big print and pictures.
On a personal level, I like the way George Bush presents a whole lot better. I just am really put off by Gore's stiffness, and that's just the way he is. I understand he probably can't help that, but you know, that doesn't make too much difference as far as how they're going to govern, I don't think.
Connie Mulder may not think it makes much difference. Lots of Americans do. Perhaps enough to help Texas's laid-back governor, against all the odds, scrape across the line in 2 weeks' time.